from human understanding. And the world, we tend to look at our world around us and we are curious, right? And so we try to discover things. We want to understand why this works or how this works. And so we go through a long processes of understanding the world around us. And that manifests itself in many different ways, but most obviously in the discovery of new truths. And so we look back over the history of the world, and someone at some point invented the wheel, right? And how wonderful that is. We are still using the wheel today. I remember in physical science class learning about the simple machines, such as the incline plane and the lever, and how those things are really used over and over and over again, maybe combined in different ways or made a little more complex. But when you break down the workings of machines, they still get down to these simple, the inclined planes, the spirals, the levers. It all comes back to the same principles. So Solomon picks up on that whole idea, and he's going to carry it really to a strong conclusion for us. But we have to understand when we get to the book of Ecclesiastes, first and foremost, what we're seeing is life under the sun, and that becomes the key here. And so that's the question in verse 3. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? And that phrase is used many times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes, and it simply means from the standpoint of right here on earth, here we are standing under the sun, what does life look like? And so in philosophical terms, we'd simply say that the writer of Ecclesiastes is taking us through life from a secular, humanistic point of view. Secular simply means the here and now, as what we see, what we observe. It's secular. Humanistic means that it is a what we would call an anthropocentric or man-centered point of view. Man is at the center part of the world. Now, for many, 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 many generations, that man-centered view led people to believe such things as a geocentric solar system, meaning that everything revolved around the earth, right? And so they had discovered the planets, the wanderers. They discovered these planets, and they said, well, those planets are revolving around the earth, and the sun that we see is revolving around the earth, and that really grew out of this philosophy that everything centered on man. And now here's Solomon, generations before that, saying maybe not everything centers around man after all. Maybe there is something beyond. And he is getting into this great debate that we've seen throughout history of the natural versus the supernatural. When we say supernatural or Superman, super is actually it's a prefix in the Greek language, and it means beyond. Superman is beyond man. He has greater strength. He's capable of things that man cannot do. So he is beyond man. Same thing with supernatural. Natural is the observable principles that govern life under the sun, but there is something beyond the natural, supernatural. And then there are those who come along and say, no, there's nothing beyond the natural. There is just the natural, which is really, to me, that's the height of arrogance. To say that I know all things and know that there's absolutely nothing beyond the natural. Now, you ask the scientist who believes only in the natural, and he won't see that as arrogance at all. But really, that's what you're saying. You're saying, I know all things, and there's nothing beyond the observable natural universe. Oh, I don't know all things. I just know that there's nothing beyond. Well, if there's something you don't know, is it possible that in the realm of the things you don't know, There's something beyond the natural. People don't like to get to those specific of questions. And so he says, look, we work, and then what happens is we are still stuck on this earth. And so he spends the greater part of the rest of the chapter 1 dealing with what we sometimes call the treadmill. Y'all have a treadmill? Familiar with the idea of the treadmill? You get on the belt and it's spinning around, right? Or it goes and you walk 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 and you make funny videos of people who trip and fall and do the face plant on the treadmill. Or some of my favorite ones are the dogs on the treadmill. Saw one the other day on, there was 2 dogs. One was on the treadmill and and the other one was on the side of the treadmill with one leg going, looking over at his buddy going, you chump. I mean, come on. This is all you got to do. The treadmill. Life is a treadmill. It's ongoing. See, the beauty of the treadmill is that in a short space, we have an endless walking path. In the short space of our lifetime, we have an endless supply of cycles. And he really begins with the idea of the life cycles. And it goes, as he says right here, this generation. One generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. And so here we are, we're trying to, this generation is trying to impart to the next generation all of its accumulated wisdom and knowledge, and then they will impart to the next generation all of its wisdom and accumulated knowledge, and hopefully they'll build upon what we know, and then we go to the next generation. That's how we have grown as a species in intelligence, is that we've been able to write and extend our knowledge beyond our life. But in the background of generation after generation after generation after generation, there is this earth remains forever. That's the constant background. It's always there. For all human discovery, for all human knowledge, for the things that we've discovered and we declared this is the truth, only 10 years to realize that wasn't really the truth, and we've discovered something new, and we build up on and we adjust and we tweak our knowledge. There is this constant in the background that is the earth. It is the observation of life as it goes on. And so there's this life cycle, the monotony of life. Then he goes into the next verse and he says that the sun rises, the sun goes down, and hastens to the place where it rises. And again, we might look at this and say, well, Solomon, you don't know what you're talking about. The sun does not hasten around to the east and set in the west and hasten back around while we can't see. It's really just the rotation of the earth. But he is not giving scientific discovery. He is viewing the earth from the earth's perspective. And this is how it appears, that the sun goes down and it hastens back to the other side of the horizon, and it comes up again. And it goes across the horizon, then it disappears and it comes back around. We refer to it as the diurnal cycle. It is that 24-hour cycle that we see because of the rotation of the earth, the amount of time it takes the earth to spin. But except for an instance in the history of mankind, in the book of Joshua, the earth has always rotated. It's never stopped. It's not something that is, scientists believe now that maybe it's slowing down, but we're not even sure of that, because we're observing it from the earth with this much time. It's amazing to me when we take a data point or two and we extrapolate out over thousands or millions or billions of years from a small data point or a small set of data points. This is all there is. This is what we know, and this is what we're saying that we know. That's really the theoretical scientific world as it is. But this diurnal cycle, it keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going. And then he goes to another one, another cycle. And it's right here. The wind blows. The wind blows to the south and it goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind. And on its circuits, the wind returns. So you have the life cycle, the diurnal cycle, the wind cycle. We talk about the jet stream. The weatherman puts the big maps of the United States, and it's got the jet stream going in, But what's amazing is if you kind of step back and look at it, what's happening? The wind pretty much is all going in the same direction. Yeah, it blows around and it swirls and eddies and tornadoes and hurricanes at times, but generally speaking, there's a pattern, there's a cycle to the wind, and Solomon even sees the cycle to the wind. All streams run to the sea, and the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, they flow there, or there they flow again. And so you have yet a fourth cycle of science, of life under this earth. It's what we call the water cycle or the hydrological cycle, and it continues to go. And of course, we have this elaborate explanation. The water evaporates, it goes into the clouds, it condenses, it falls as precipitation onto the land. The land runs off to the creeks and the streams, which go to the rivers, which eventually flow to the oceans, and the oceans evaporate, and it goes into the clouds, and it comes back over the land, and you have this elaborate cycle that we see, and that's our water cycle, and he sees it again, but from his point of view, the rivers keep flowing into the ocean, but the oceans are not full. Why? Because the whole cycle is that the water moves and it goes from place to place. And he says, all things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye cannot be or is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. The phrase all things here could properly be stated or translated as all words. All words are full of weariness. And that kind of captures the next statement, a man cannot utter it. That there's no end of his speaking, or there's no words that actually capture what is going on. But I think probably this translation is all things are full of weariness. It's kind of the capturing of this monotony of life cycle, the treadmill that we're on. He says those things are full of weariness, and in a sense that we continue to look for the answer. We're lifting the rug and looking under it and seeing what's going on. We want to peel back the curtain and see what's going on behind it. And as we continue to do this, we just wear ourselves out, and there's not always an explanation for how everything works. I know we like to think there's always an explanation, but there are some things that we search and search and search, and there's not an answer. Man cannot utter it. He cannot speak to exactly how it happens. As life marches on and on, man has no words for everything. He wants something more. I think that's the point that Solomon is getting to, is that with this monotony as the backdrop of human life, we want something more. We're looking for something beyond the here and now, something beyond the life cycle, generation after generation, and the day-night cycle, the wind cycle, the water cycle. We want something more. We're looking beyond, and so we want a change in the cycle. We want some new teaching, something new to see, or something new to hear. But the eye is not satisfied. He'll conclude this with a famous statement: "There is nothing new under the sun." This, I think, is a natural longing for something beyond. In chapter 3 and verse 11, it says that he put eternity in their hearts. God has put eternity in our hearts. Now, obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into chapter 3 later, but think about what he's saying. He's saying that here we live on this earth that is temporary, with this monotonous life cycle that goes over and over and over and over again, but in our hearts, How do you see that? Can you see eternity in man's heart on an MRI or a CAT scan? Or maybe open heart surgery, and we peel back the layers of the cardiac muscle and look inside the pump itself. Do we see eternity there? No. It's because we're still looking from the vantage point of under the sun. What he's saying, that he's put something in our hearts, in our souls, within the nature of man that craves the beyond the sun. Jennifer? Yes. In fact, I've often described it as the spark of the divine, because God said, let us make man, how? In our image. There is a spark of God in humanity. He did not say that about the dog, the cat, the rabbit, the donkey, or whatever animal you want to put there. We are so conditioned, though, in our society, in our culture, that when we look at man, man is just part of the animal kingdom. Or man is and I'm guilty, I'll say it, man is a social animal, that we desire the collective. It's rare to find a true hermit. We want interaction with others. Man is social that way. But we claim he's an animal. He may be at the top of the food chain, but he's just another animal. God, that is so foreign from God's understanding of what man is and who man is. There is a spark, there's something special about us. And that spark of the divine, that Spirit of God that he breathed or spirited into man in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7, it's in our hearts. It's part of our natural makeup. Yeah, I'm talking about a supernatural part, but that's who we are. And so man is not satisfied with the monotony of life. We hear, we teach. There's something more, the driving force of our natural longing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. And so there's that statement, nothing new under the sun, in verse 9. Nothing new under the sun is simply a statement that the treadmill of earthly life doesn't change from an earthly perspective. We're not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly the day lasts 30 hours instead of 24. We're not going to wake up suddenly tomorrow and water doesn't evaporate, condense, precipitate, flow, evaporate. That cycle is not going to change. Earth is going to continue until what? Until Judgment Day. Not until we have so much trash it destroys itself, not because we've used too much spray paint and the ozone layer is depleted and it burns the earth to a crisp. The earth will stop on at exactly the moment God has determined. Not one day early, not one day later. And mankind does not have the power to adjust that date. We can't do it. Now, does that mean that we don't need to worry about our environment? Personally, I don't want to sit around in my own filth all the time. Do you? So let's be responsible, but be responsible with what God has given to us. That's another biblical principle, right? To be good stewards of the gift that God has given to us. This world is God's gift to man. Let's be good stewards of it. Let's not waste resources that we don't have to. But at the same time, let's not be so arrogant as to think that we will move God's judgment day sooner or later than what God has appointed. There's nothing new. Thomas Edison said that in all of his inventions, they were only bringing out the secrets of nature for the happiness of mankind. Now think about Edison, who brought forth the light bulb, right? He invented the light bulb, and we say that all the time. He invented the light bulb, but what did he do? He took material that already existed, and he followed principles that were already established and combined them in a different way to produce a light bulb, or the wax cylinder phonograph, or all the things that he invented. But here's Edison, this great inventive mind, and he says, what? All I'm doing is taking the secrets that are already there and using them for the happiness of mankind. And that kind of falls right into this idea of the nothing new under the sun. It's all here. Where does true newness come from? Look, we don't create. We're the creature, right? Romans chapter 1, we're the creature. We don't create. Who creates? God creates. Right. Exactly. But God is the creator. He created the universe. He created mankind. But think about what else he has done. Warren Wiersbe, I like something that he says. He says, only God can create new things, and he begins by making sinners new creatures when they trust Jesus Christ to save them, 2 Corinthians 5:7. Then they can walk in newness of life, Romans 6:4, and sing a new song, Psalm 40 and verse 3, and enter into God's presence by a new and living way, Hebrews 10:20. And one day they will enjoy a new heaven and a new earth, Revelation 21:1. When God says, behold, I make all things new, Revelation 21 and verse 5. Newness belongs to God. True newness belongs to God. And so, what can it be said? See, this is new. It has already been in the ages before us. Well, now, because of the sacrifice of Christ and the opportunities we have to find real renewal for the soul, we can finally say, look, this is new. But it all depends on the work of Christ in our lives. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. This is why we think that something is new. It's because we forget and we don't read the minutes from the last meeting. That's what it comes down to. When we say, oh, look, see here, this is new, it's either because we have forgotten that it has already been, or we haven't read the knowledge of or discoveries of man in the past. It's human to strike out and seek to invent the wheel again. It's here, but we want to do more. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Solomon is now going to turn his attention to finding meaning and purpose in life. He says, I applied my heart. In other words, I wasn't just going to live my life and see what happened. He said, I set out on a discovery course. I'm going to, apply the best principles of scientific explanation and discovery that I can, and I'm going to find something. And he's looking for the meaning and the purpose in life. He says, here's my backdrop. Everything just keeps going the same as it's always been, and yet we still yearn for something more. And so I wanted to figure out, why do we yearn this way? Why am I here? What is the purpose of my life? The pursuit of knowledge and the belief that if we keep learning, we will ultimately find answers to give us meaning and peace. I think that's the statement with the eyes are not satisfied and the ears are not filled. We're simply not satisfied with what we know so far. And so we keep searching and searching. But what we're searching for is not just how the clock ticks. We're searching for why the clock ticks. Knowing how something works is nice, because look, if it breaks, we can fix it, right? Or we can build upon those principles, maybe improve it. But why? Why is all this here? What is the meaning? Why do the seconds tick away? Why do we feel the way we do? Why do we long for something more? And he calls it an unhappy business. It's sometimes as we're searching and we're searching and we're searching, we get to a dead end. We hit the wall, and there's frustration. We pull our hair out, it seems. But we're looking for meaning and peace. Before Adam sinned, here's what I love. Before Adam sinned, he had no philosophical problems. He walked with God in the cool of the day. He was in touch with the infinite reality of God. He had an absolute answer for his origin and the dignity of man. God told him these things. He knew these things because of his relationship with God in this pristine paradise. All of these things were there. He understood his place in the cosmos. He knew why he was here, where he was going, and what he needed to do. And then he sinned. And the lights went out, and his awareness and his purpose vanished. See, that's what sin does. Sin brings chaos, confusion, ignorance. And that's what it did for Adam. When we start talking about the consequences of Adam and Eve's sin in the Garden of Eden, that's one of the biggest consequences. Is that knowledge of our purpose and our meaning and our drive of life that was so crystal clear in the Garden of Eden has been confused by sin. And now we grope. Now the children of man, the children of Adam, are groping aimlessly, trying to find answers. Adam lost that he lost in sin. And the machine, the treadmill, nature continues churning, and it churns out hopelessness and unhappiness because it doesn't have the answers that meet the spark of the divine within us, that desire for eternity, that longing for eternity. He says, I've seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after the wind. And there's two of the key words that we talked about last week. The idea of the striving after the wind, or vexation of the spirit, some translations have. It's empty. The pointlessness is that it doesn't have a point that drives us in that direction. Solomon put his wisdom and his prosperity to use. You remember when God blessed him, he asked him, which do you want? Do you want riches, or do you want a long life? And he asked for wisdom, and God granted him wisdom and riches and a long life. And so now money is no object. He's a man who understands the principles of the age. And so he says, I've seen everything that is done. I've applied my heart. I've actively sought it out. Well, what if you ran out of money? Solomon says, I wasn't going to run out of money. I had plenty. What if I ran out of time? I had a long life. He got to observe more than most could or would be able to. He saw man was looking for answers. Answers to questions like, how many roads must a man walk down before you can call him a man? Or how many times must the cannonballs fly before they are forever banned? Dylan was looking for meaning in life, as most of us are, in some way or other. And when someone finally attains, or when does someone finally attain their purpose or complete their mission? When will man stop killing each other over the pettiness of this world? That's the the answers are blown in the wind. That song that he wrote was this great protest song. But what it really is doing is asking, why do we keep getting caught up in these wars over the pride and the pettiness of mankind? How come people continue to die? Isn't there something more to this world? And Bob Dylan hit upon a truth that I'm not sure he really understood when he got to his chorus. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. What did Solomon say? It's a vanity, it's striving after the wind. Dylan felt the emptiness. If you know anything about Dylan's life, he tried to fill it in all the wrong ways. With drugs, alcohol, and women, as most people do, because that's what we can lay our hands on and say, this will fill the void. But it didn't. And it hasn't. Because it can't. It simply can't. Humanity has a problem, but we are not capable in and of ourselves to identify what is wrong. What is crooked cannot be straight, he says. What is lacking cannot be counted. This world is changed because of sin. We sometimes refer to it as a fallen world. Understand, when we say fallen world, we're not saying that man's human nature is fallen and totally depraved from birth because of Adam's sin. That's not what we're saying. When we say a fallen world, we mean that this world is a changed place. Look, as beautiful as the mountains are, it's not the Garden of Eden. As beautiful as the seascape may be, as inspiring as crops in the field or forests rolling over the hills might be, it's still not the Garden of Eden. It is still not the paradise which God originally created. There's something more. This world has fallen in a way that it is contrary to us, and in a way that we cannot fix it. We walk around with our tools and our tool belt, and we want to fix things. We cannot fix this fallen world. It takes God to fix our sinful state. But we still live in a world that is contrary to us. Since humans are the problem, because we're the ones that sin, one might be tempted to think, if we get rid of all the humans, then we can fix the world. We'll get rid of since the humans and their sin are the cause and the problem, we can fix the world. And yet the lesson of Noah is, when you get rid of all the humans in the world and save just a few of the best ones, it still doesn't fix the problem of sin. What's the first thing Noah did when he got off the ark? Built an altar and worshiped God. What's the second thing he did? Passed out drunk. So that's the problem. As good as we may be, we still fail. So getting rid of all the humans wasn't the answer. And so we then, we look to God to fix a problem that we cannot fix. And the answer was not in getting rid of people. The answer was in saving people. And so he sent his son to die so that we might have forgiveness. How much time we got, Terry? I know, I've got glasses. I can't see the hands on the wall. About 6 minutes to the first bell? Right now? Okay, all right. We're good. It's interesting. Noah played into the way that we generally, deal with life. We praise God, and then we turn around and we forsake God. And it's similar to what James said in James chapter 3 when he said, "From the same mouth comes blessings and cursing." My brothers, these things ought not to be that way, or ought not so to be. We're good at being good part of the time. And of course, we want to be good more of the time. In fact, I think most of us want to be good all the time. But the beauty is God knew that even though we may want that and strive for that there were going to be weaknesses, and he would make up those shortcomings, the falling. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Solomon searched the world over, accumulating knowledge of history and medicine, philosophy and wisdom. He sorted through the foolish ideas and found the kernels of value and wisdom. He learned about the rise and the fall of empires. He studied different religions and gods. He read important thinkers and studied with wise counselors. He spared no expense. He left no stone unturned. We don't always have that kind of luxury that he had. He said, look, as long as I have this luxury, I'm going to try it. Now, when we look at Solomon's life and the historical narratives of them, we're disappointed in this man who is wise by the blessing of God, who is blessed in riches beyond measure, who is blessed with a long life. And we look at that life and we say, man, he, in a lot of ways, he wasted his life, didn't he? And yet, Solomon is saying, I don't think he's asking us not to judge his foolish decisions. He's saying, despite my foolish decisions, I learned something. Come join me on this process as we discover what I learned. I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. We take that 3-year-old who's just learning the world, and their spirits run free. They're happy-go-lucky. And then as they learn about the world, and the more they learn, the more the burdens of life weigh upon them. With much wisdom, he said, there is this vexation. It's difficult as we look at life, this vexation, this burden. He learned the universe in itself does not contain anything to give meaning or purpose or happiness or joy or fulfillment in this life. We have things that pacify us our days on this earth. And we thought we threw the pacifier away when we were no longer babies, right? No, we didn't throw it away. We've just replaced it with something else. We replaced it with games and relationships when we were little, and as we got older, we replaced it with education and with possessions and with deeper relationships and with work, and then we replaced it with recreation. We've replaced the pacifier with something else, but our souls are still just pacified here on this earth, because ultimately what we're looking for is that eternity that God has put in our hearts. Does that mean that we're all doom and gloom on this earth? No, not at all. Does it mean that it's bad that we have these pacifiers? Not at all. God has given us those blessings as our pacifiers that we can on this earth still have happiness and joy and fulfillment, but ultimately it is because we have dealt with the human problem. We cannot change our human problem with knowledge. The more we know and understand, the clearer we see this, and the greater our sorrow becomes. And we're kind of stuck. We're left right here wondering what's next. So where we answer this question is in our relationship with God. When salvation comes, we have it in hand. These questions become answered. Not because we observed something happening on the earth and said, aha, that answers meaning of life. Because we've listened to the Word of God, and that answers the meaning of life. We'll pick up in chapter 2 next week. I appreciate your attention.